Hello, and welcome to season two of Building Influence. My name is Rowena Moraes, and the Building Influence show features industry thought leaders and experienced professionals, some in the corporate world, some who are entrepreneurs, but everyone living and who has achieved considerable success in their professional lives. Now, these interviews bring together the best strategies, tools, and tips that each of them have found to be most effective in building visibility and credibility and achieving the goals that drive them. So this show examines three aspects of building influence, looking at an individual's profile, their network, and their body of work. And I was inspired to create this show because I believe that everyone has it within them to build their personal brand and their body of work. And watching these episodes, I hope you'll be inspired too to make things happen for yourself. Now, season two has us doing a deep dive into people and human capital or human resources. And this time I'm focusing specifically on Australia. My guest today is Sarah Novelli. Sarah is the Executive Director, People and Culture at BGIS, a global leader in integrated facility management services. Sarah is a 2024 HRD Australia Hotlist winner, as well as the Excellence Awardee for HR Director of the Year 2024 at the Australian HR Awards. So congratulations, Sarah. Warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for coming on today. How are you doing?
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, very, very happy. I'm pretty excited, actually. I understand you've done some amazing work leading the end-to-end M&A process for 8 acquisitions across ANZ, implemented a global HRMS system, established award-winning onboarding, career pathway, reward recognition programs. So pretty excited to see and hear more from you. So we'll dig right in. Let's start with your career journey. Can you tell me a little bit more about what this looks like for people who are coming across you for the first time? How much of it was deliberate? How much of it was a bit of going with the flow? In short, I'd like to find out, are you exactly where you intended to be?
Yeah, sure. My career wasn't deliberate until it was. When I left school, I actually thought I wanted to go into psychology, and I started out doing
Yeah.
a psychology degree, dropped out, and ended up working in admin roles.
Okay.
When I worked in admin roles, I was in corporate organizations, and I sat quite close to the HR teams in those roles. But I remember hearing them having these conversations about we worked in services corporations and this idea that we weren't selling a product, so we didn't have any competitive advantage outside of our people. So capability and attraction, engagement, they were our competitive advantage. And I remember hearing it and just wanting to know more. I was pretty opportunistic. I actually didn't wait for many opportunities to come my way. I just sort of went in and spoke to the HR team and just said, I want to know what I can do to get
Go
exposure.
get it.
And they were really gracious about it. They let me sit in on meetings and just take minutes, small things like that. But I really didn't wait for opportunities. I was constantly asking, are there roles available that I can take? And a role came up, and fortunately, because I'd been so persistent, they
That is that
they
is
they
really
considered.
intriguing to hear. Like, do you think that's just in your nature, or made some, you just had some ideas and plans at that point? Like, what was behind that?
I just think I'm always someone who figures if I want something and I ask for it, the worst that will happen is someone will say no, and then everything will go back to normal and I'll carry on with my day. I don't have any concerns around being rejected. I'll just keep going through different avenues. So, and that's really been a big part of my career journey. I mean, when a role
Mm,
came up, I just sort of said, I'm the right person for this. I know I am.
yeah.
And I was really fortunate I got it. When I was in that role, I started working with more senior and influential HR leaders. And I remember there was one in particular who I was just so drawn to. She just seemed so incredible. And I remember saying to her, I want to work for you. What can I do? With that things I can help you with on top of the role that I'm doing now? And
Mm,
she, graciously allowed me to do a lot of work with her. And I mean, even the role that I'm in now, every opportunity that I've had, it's been me backing myself. I think
mm,
I'm a big believer in confidence without ego and just saying, I know that I can do this. What do I need to
Mhm.
do to show you? Can I get some exposure?
Yeah,
So yeah, like I said, it wasn't deliberate until it was.
I like that, confidence without ego. And do you think that that's been pretty much the case your whole life? Like even when you were in school in your younger days?
Yeah, well, it's everything. I even remember I had a crush on a guy that I worked with, back at a panel beating shop. And I was like, I'm just going to tell him I want to go out with him. What's the worst he could say? He'll say no. And now he's my husband. So I've always just figured that put yourself out there. The worst that happens is
Yes.
they reject you and then you just continue on.
I love it. It's very fresh and original. And but I don't think everyone is like that. You know what I mean? Some of us are just sort of hold back and not they may have that confidence, but still something holds them back from going out there and pursuing those things. So it's really wonderful to hear this. Is there any one tactic that you think has really helped you to become more visible? And when I talk about visibility, it's not just in terms of visibility for visibility's sake. It's really about being known for your skills, being known for the things that you're passionate and good at. Any one tactic?
Look, I think leveraging any feelings that I had around thought leadership on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been a really big platform for me,
Mm-hmm.
and there are things that I promote that are really about personal values that I'll
Yeah.
promote on LinkedIn. So, for example, I'm in an executive director of people and culture role, but something I'm quite personally passionate about is in the childcare sector, there's this huge exodus of childcare workers. And every time a childcare worker position is vacant, between 6 and 12 families is impacted. More often than not, that means people have to stay at home looking after kids. And we see a lot in society that's women. So, because I'm quite personally passionate about seeing women in the workplace and women in leadership roles, but also understanding there's causes I'm personally passionate about,
Yeah.
I will talk about my personal values, what I'm personally interested in on LinkedIn, but also I can usually find a way to tie why those are important in the workplace.
What are you hoping to do as a result of those activities, like being vocal and advocating for certain things? What are you hoping to get from those things?
I more often than not try and find organizations, not for profits, that are aligned with my views. And I know that by working with them and trying to do advocacy work, that they have a greater voice. And I think the more voices they have, the more ability they have for reform. And I've seen there's an organization that's fabulous that I am very engaged with. It's called the Parenthood. But some of the activities that they've done to even in the last 12 months, the successes that they've had on, superannuation being paid for women, and there's been a recent modern award increase discussed for childcare workers. I mean, that's come as a result of people who are supporting that cause. So I think when people are personally passionate about things, find organizations that are advocating and lobbying for change, and don't be afraid to use your voice to back them.
So is this primarily on LinkedIn then? Or do you have
Yeah, I do
other
a lot of it on
ways?
LinkedIn. I've also asked them how I can be more actively involved through them. I've been on
The organizations that you're
yeah,
supporting? Yeah.
I'll ask the organisations how I can be more actively involved. I mean, I've been in the Australian Financial Review, the Sydney Morning Herald, where I've shared my own experiences as a mother of a young child and some of the struggles that we've had, and then I'll promote those through LinkedIn as well, to show that that's something that I really strongly value.
Is there any one thing that you've seen as a result of all this work that helps you keep going in this direction?
More often than not, it's that there's a lot of people who feel very similarly, and they're looking
Mm.
for someone who has a voice in it. I, I,
Yes.
I feel fortunate that I, for some reason, have the confidence in myself to be vocal about my views. But one thing that comes through is when I do different posts or articles, I'll get a lot of sometimes messages or
Yes.
comments saying, "This is exactly how I feel. Thank you
Yes.
for speaking."
Yes. No, I hear what you're saying. I've been in that situation too. And yeah, not everyone feels equipped or capable of, being right at the forefront of that conversation because it's not necessarily a one-off. Sometimes you've got to keep advocating. You've got to keep having those conversations. And yeah, some people may not necessarily have the energy or the wherewithal to do that. And so when they see others doing it, they'll back you. They'll, reach out, sometimes publicly, but often enough, quietly through messaging
Yeah.
and show that support. And that can be also a way for you to say, this stuff that I'm doing, it's working, it's making a dent somewhere, and so I'm going to keep doing it. That's great.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about your profile. Now I'd like to talk about your network. How do you feel about networking in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty social person. I
Mhm.
always tend to find that no matter who someone is, they've got something that you didn't know, like you'll learn something from them. Um, I also find that with networking, when you find people who have shared values and interests, it's like it's just such a natural connection. So I feel quite comfortable networking, but I also don't feel like I push myself or force myself to be somebody that I'm not when I'm
Mm.
trying to network
What's
with people. I think
networking? What's networking to you? Like, what do you consider some of these activities? What would you do?
Look, I mean, I think, like I sort of said, like I'll, connect with like-minded people through different advocacy groups. I also go to a lot of industry events. If I
Okay.
see speakers who are talking about topics that are really they resonate with me, I have no hesitation in sort of going up to them afterwards and wanting to continue the conversation and stay connected.
Yep.
I also tend to find that, again, through LinkedIn or different social medias, or you tend to see people who have content which just it naturally resonates with you, and you want to have conversations with them
Yeah.
about it and how you can be more
And
involved.
you don't feel like you're perfectly comfortable reaching out to them, like cold connection and just reaching out and saying hi and continuing that conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had a situation where I've reached out to someone where they've said I'm not, or they've given me the cold shoulder or not been interested. I think
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
when they find someone who's interested in what they're talking about, they're very receptive. I've never been rejected or felt uncomfortable in a networking situation.
Mm. Okay. If you were to give advice to someone who's relatively new to the idea of networking, or maybe just a little bit reluctant, what would be one or two things that, you could share that you feel would help them along?
Um, so this is an approach that I guess I've always had, is whether I've been at an industry event or even if I'm just thinking I need to kind of build my network somehow, I always set a goal of two, as in try and find two people to connect with, just
Mm.
two separate people at this event, as an example.
Okay.
Um, and just start with, two questions, ask them about them, ask them why they're passionate about it, if there's something on their journey that's made them really interested in it. I just tend to find that when you get people talking about themselves and their
Yes.
experiences, it's just so
Yes.
easy to continue a
Yes.
conversation.
Absolutely. I mean, people want to talk about themselves, and it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, it
Talking
100%
about your
is.
journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You've kind of already touched on this. How do you make decisions about who to connect to? But is there anything else that you'd like to share about that?
Um, I guess also it's just I try and find people who can teach me something that I wouldn't have already known or thought about. I mean, I'm also really particularly passionate about analytics and data in HR. And so when I find people who are really interested in those topics, I naturally want to go and find out what they've done, what their journey was, how did they get there, what are they doing next. Um, so I just think finding people who can teach you something is just invaluable. That idea of lifelong learning, I think that comes from people more than it does from, courses or training.
Mm, yeah, I like that. That's a very good point. Now, in terms of your body of work, I use this term body of work to refer to what some people may call a kind of digital portfolio, but it's basically everything that speaks to your expertise, your experience, the issues that you care about. So when you think about your body of work, when you think about your unique strengths, um, from a career standpoint, what can you talk about in terms of what these are, and what have you done to build on these strengths?
Yeah, sure. I think the strengths that I have are HR innovation, and data analytics, and just advocating for inclusivity in the workplace, and particularly inclusive leadership. I've always tried to build on those by finding roles or challenges that allow me to, solution problems that exist.
Yeah.
I'm very big on continuous learning, so I do try and attend different industry events. I do try and be more involved in thought leadership, writing thought leadership pieces on where we're at. I also tend to find that by putting myself out there, that makes like-minded people want to connect with me. And
Yes.
usually they're further ahead on the journey than I am. So it helps me. But I think just connecting with other professionals in the industry, staying active, promoting what you're doing, but also, and I think everyone should be, really proud of what they've achieved. And when you feel proud about something, you should promote it, but also have an understanding that there's also people out there who are doing it better than you. So promote what you're doing,
Yeah.
but also feel free to say to people, if you have other insights or tips that you want to share, let's connect. That's really
So
important.
public speaking then is also on the cards. You do a fair bit of
Yeah,
that.
I do present. I do present a different, and I'm very fortunate that I've been asked to speak at HR summits. I've probably done 5 or 6 this year. I've got a couple lined up for next year, and it's a little uncomfortable because even though I feel confident in what I'm saying, I'm also aware that I'm in a room where there are going to be people much smarter than me in that room. So there is always a sense of doubt of, what if I say something that I think is great, and everyone sits in the room thinking, well, we did that 10 years ago. But again, more often than not, there are people in the room who they're drawn to the topic. They want to talk more about it. Some of them have more experience, some of them have less. And I just think that there's no one that you can't have a conversation with that makes you think about things differently.
You talked briefly about inclusive leadership. Like, we know what inclusion means, but when you talk about inclusive leadership, what are you referring to here?
I've always worked in pretty male-dominated industries, and I find that they're very traditional and they're very repetitive in things. I'm also a huge believer that for Australia's productivity to increase, we need to think of different and more innovative ways to do things. And that means that if you have a boardroom of 10 of the same people with the same background, with the same education, no one's thinking differently, no one's challenging. So for me, when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about people who come from different backgrounds, people who come from different life experiences. I think that corporate Australia is doing a really good job of starting to try and make sure that there aren't limits or blocks on people being able to access senior leader roles. But I still think that there's a long way for us to go to have more, Indigenous representation, more female representation, people who just come from, a big initiative that we're working on at the moment is even veterans, people who have been really high up in the Defence Force, who leave the Defence Force, have not known any other world and have not known the private sector, but have got these incredible skills in leadership, safety, governance, looking at those transferable skills and going, yeah, maybe you don't fit the mold that we've typically had, but the skills and experience that you have will bring such a different way of thinking. And that's how I think innovation is created.
What do you find is for you one of the bigger challenges as you push this agenda?
I think that people like things to stay the same sometimes because it's comfortable. You think of all the things that happen every day, just basic heuristics. Too many changes can be overwhelming for people, and people can be resistant to change. So I strongly believe in what I say and what I do. There are people who will push back on that, but when it's all part of a journey, I suppose there's going to be people who are more excited about thinking differently and changing. There's also a lot of people who go, well, look, we've been doing this for a long time and nothing's wrong with it, so why would we look at changing it?
How do you address those sort of arguments?
It's sort of just that classic, for me, a lot of it just comes down to innovation. There are organizations that are actually going out of business because they're refusing to change. The world is just different now. and innovation, it doesn't have to be big, huge changes. I mean, I think I saw this picture, it was the Apple iPhone from since it came out all the way to now. And if you look at the first one compared to now, there's a huge difference. But if you look at every single model that was introduced sort of lined up, they're very, very small changes. But had they not made those changes and they stayed with that first iPhone, Apple wouldn't be what it is now. There's a lot of organizations that are the same, you know, Blockbuster, and organizations that will go out of business because they refuse to change. So one thing that I do also try and do is understand that I need to be patient, that I'm not going to walk into my workplace tomorrow and see everything that I'd love to see, but we can start to chip away at some of the barriers or blocks or processes or whatever exists in the organizations that's stopping us from change, just little bit by little bit.
Do you feel like you're tackling this alone? Do you have people within the organization that believe in some of the things that you're talking about, who share a similar vision? Are they on board?
I'm very fortunate, and I will only work for organizations whose values I am completely aligned with. I'm very fortunate to work with an exceptional CEO, an exceptional board, executive leaders. I just think I'm very fortunate, but I say I'm fortunate. I was very deliberate in choosing an organization who aligned with me on that. But I also think the other thing is I can see how if I wasn't vocal about it, I would feel like I was battling it alone. I do something really small. It's not a huge thing, but when I'm out of the office, I don't put a standard out of office. I will say, I'm taking today off today to spend the day with my daughter, Adriana. I won't be on emails today, but I'll be back tomorrow. And I'm quite vocal about the fact that I do that because I think it's important that people understand that when we talk about work-life balance, that exists for senior leaders as well. But what I find is by being vocal about it, all of a sudden you start seeing everybody else across the organization, hey, I'm on leave now because I'm getting married. I've got my daughter's graduation tomorrow. Like, things like that, I feel that it's sort of, I would say like a domino in a set. People
That's
start
good.
wanting to back you and they want to do.
Yep. It's always carrying that first part when you're kind of making that change and you're the lone voice. But once everyone is doing similar things, you know, you're on the right track with that. Are there any other stumbling blocks that you see you've encountered or that you foresee in the near future with some of the issues that you are pushing?
Maybe something that I am aware of is I would consider myself to be probably younger to be in a role like this. And I don't think that really has anything to do with capability, but I am aware that means I have less experience than some. And some people who might not agree with what I'm saying, it's very easy for them to say, well, I don't agree with what you're saying. That's going to come down to your experience. So I don't think people are ageist or anything like that towards me. But I guess one of the reasons why I am also quite big on data analytics is when I present an idea, I like to back it with data. And I like to explain why a change needs to happen. People don't think that I'm just taking a guess at something. People can see that I've actually done my research. I've looked at industry benchmarks. I've looked at trends. I've done forecasting. I've looked at all of the information that I need to present. But I also think a big part of it comes down to I need to back myself in what I'm saying. And there are going to be people who will say she doesn't have the same career experience as I do, so I can shut it down. But I also think if I just keep backing myself, being vocal about what I'm doing, getting other people on board, finding who my key stakeholders are, and being in a position where I can get their backing and influence, that's pretty important for me, I think.
Where do you see yourself moving towards, or where are there any particular aspects that you'd like to shine a light on in terms of the work that you're currently doing?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I feel very fortunate that I have found a career and a job that I would probably do for free. I hope my CEO doesn't see that comment. But I think that that's a big I've found an organization that helps me develop and grow in my own roles, and I've expanded a lot of my own knowledge outside of just general subject matter expertise in HR into being probably a lot more focused on, commercial and being involved in acquisitions and mergers and various things. So for me, when I see an opportunity and something that I'm drawn to, I don't have any hesitations in reaching out about how I can continue growing in that area. But for me, I'm just really content. I have a fabulous team around me. I'm so fortunate to work for a fabulous executive team and board and CEO, an organization whose values I'm so aligned with, and an organization who backs me. So I'm pretty content with where I am, and I just think I'm big on let's just keep getting better. Let's just keep growing and let's just keep changing.
That's awesome. That's really good. Glad to hear it. So now just 3 final questions before we end, talking about habits and approach. The first one is, can you share 2 habits that you think are pretty essential to your success?
Yeah. I am a big believer in authentic leadership. I do tend to find that people, as they maybe go into more senior roles, put up more of a wall and can come across as being quite at arm's length. And I also think that that's why they don't come across quite as approachable all the time. They're not having conversations that people would actually have day to day. They don't engage in those conversations. And I just don't see much benefit in that. I'm pretty authentic about who I am, where I'm at, what I believe in. I think that's probably why people see me as being more, maybe a little bit more approachable than others. So I just think authenticity is really, really quite important. And I think just, continual learning, adaptation to what's going on. I just think that if I think of where HR was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it has significantly shifted into a much more strategic partner for the organization, where we can look at an organizational strategy and say, well, what is it that we need to do to make sure that we have the right people doing the right roles at the right time with the right skill set? It's a lot more strategic than I think it probably was originally. And I think that where HR is headed is going to be a predominantly strategic function in an organization to deliver organizational goals, particularly with corporate Australia, a lot of it being a services-based industry. I think that continuous learning and thinking that you've done it or you've nailed it just isn't ever going to be enough. You've just got to keep getting better and keeping up with trends and wanting to help the organizations that you're in be as productive and as efficient and as safe and as diverse as possible.
And learning for you is not limited to the traditional, the micro learning or the courses. It's also in the conversations you choose to have with people, with the issues you're pushing, and other organizations that you may be supporting and advocating for. That's all part and parcel of the learning journey then?
Yeah, I think that you never want to be the smartest person in the room. That's a problem. I'm always in the bottom quartile of intelligence, but I want to be surrounded by smart people. But the other thing is, when I hire people who are much smarter than me at the roles that they do than I am at mine. My team are the best at what I'm convinced every single person in that team is one of the best at what they do in that role. Being surrounded by intelligent people who, I can suggest something, but then you have somebody who's an expert in that field say, actually, I wouldn't go about it that way. That only expands my knowledge in an area and it makes me think differently. So that's very important.
What do you think has been instrumental in helping you overcome fear?
I've always worked for leaders who, when I backed myself, they backed me as well. I've been really fortunate. I haven't jumped around too much in my career. I've really only had, I would say, probably 2 long-term roles, but 2 organizations that I've worked for. But in that time, having leaders who have backed me, and when I've said, I think I can do this, for them to respond with, I know you can do that. That for me is what probably keeps building on my confidence, and also them understanding that they're playing a huge role in my career journey, and really any success that I have in my journey is really thanks to them for backing me and for coaching me, providing me feedback. I've always had leaders who they give clear feedback, and I think clear is kind. They don't go, yeah, great job, and then actually not. Like they give me really good constructive feedback to help me get better, and that's how I see all that feedback. But having good leaders who back you, I mean, that pretty much eliminates the fear that
that's true.
I have.
So are there any situations or circumstances when you might actually have a little bit of fear or uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all the time. But I don't know, maybe it's like that thing that I said at the beginning, like worst thing that will happen is it'll go wrong. And then we'll all move on with our day, and we'll make sure that we try and solution it, and we'll get it right next time. But I think that the thing is, if you're concerned about what people think or getting it wrong, I mean, you would just never leave your home. Things are going to be messy, and you know what, and just because I get something wrong doesn't mean that I'm not good. It just means that I got that thing wrong, and I can isolate that specific event and go, that's fine, we got it wrong, let's fix it up. But I can also focus on the fact that there's a lot of stuff that we get right. And I can still be proud of that and not let one event or one up make me change my view.
Yeah, I think that's become clear, even though this is, one of the first conversation we've had. I think that sentiment and the way you approach things is really coming across. And I think that has had a tremendous impact in how you approach everything that you've done in your life, and obviously had an impact in terms of the results you've received. Okay, last question. Any guiding principles or decisions that you believe have helped you play the long game?
Anything that has helped me play the long game. I just think that you have to do something that you believe in. I don't think that I have necessarily, they talk about bringing your whole self to work. I feel like I do that. I feel like I've found leaders who will let me do that. I feel like I've found organizations who have values the same as mine. I mean, I said to you before, I would do my job for free. And I think that's because I just feel I can show up every day, be myself. When I'm interested in something, I express that interest and I go above and beyond to learn it. I try and surround myself with intelligent people. I just think that maybe there's people who they let their own self-doubts stop them from being where they could be at. And I just think, I mean, I also have this theory that like people are so much better than they even realize that they are. It's usually yourself who's your own biggest critic, and people will let that fear of, well, what if this goes wrong? What if someone thinks this? I think if you can get rid of that noise, the people are just so incredibly smart and adaptable, and I think people are incredible people. So I just think that people need to get rid of that doubt in their head and just back themselves, because they can do it. And I see it every day in my team when they doubt themselves, and I go, I know you can do this. And then they do it, and they do it better than I would have.
That is such a wonderful, positive, uplifting way to end this. For those who want to know more about you, where can they find you online?
I would just say find Sarah Novelli on LinkedIn. I don't have blogs or websites, but I do post about things that I'm really passionate about on there. And if people, connect with what I say, then and I guess also I always like to talk to people and meet people who can teach me things. So I think everyone can teach me something. So don't hesitate to reach out at any point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for taking time out of your schedule to do this interview with me. It's been really nice to get this time with you, learn more about your career journey, and it's a fascinating interview. This has been an interview with Sarah Novelli, Executive Director, People and Culture at BGIS, and I will see you all in a future episode.